Everyone, Extra Shot, we're going to dive right in. Yesterday here on Extra Shot, we talked about the flu, and we talked about how you guys were responding on Monday. You had a ton of questions. We heard you. So we reached out to our resident expert, right, from Kaiser Permanente, pediatrician here. We have Dr. Ken Hempstead. So thank you so much for taking time out of this really busy flu season. I mean,
it's crazy.
We're not even through the flu season, and we're seeing just incredible numbers when we want to compare statewide for people ages 65 years old or younger who have died. Last year, the number was 4. This year, not even through the season, we're already at 25 plus, 27 to be more specific. Do these numbers shock you? Should people be scared? Because people are saying, I'm getting a flu shot, I'm still getting sick, or I'm not getting a flu shot, I'm getting sick. What is your response to the numbers?
Well, certainly we can have great compassion for anyone who has even been severely impacted or lost their lives, and that's horrible. I think we can agree to that. And yes, the numbers are ahead of where we were last year.
Significantly.
Significantly.
5 times as much in some articles.
It is. On the other hand, I mean, we have seen that just the overall flu season is just peaking earlier.
Okay.
So it's a little hard to know exactly where it'll go from here. It may simply be that the overall numbers won't be that different from past years, because we may just see the peak and then have it come back down.
But why was last year 4 at the end for 65 years and older? I mean, that seems very low. Was it a low death season in compared to years past?
So that number 4 would have been for this date. So that wasn't the total for last year. That was just as of this first week or so of January.
Got it.
So that number ultimately got much higher. And we're just there quicker.
Right. It's like if you have those 2 bell curves and they're starting off at different places.
Exactly.
So it's not apples to orange.
Got it.
Right. So the optimistic viewpoint would be that we see that it just goes up and comes back down like it did last year.
Right.
And, again, that's still every year flu is a problem. Every year we want people to get protected with their flu vaccine.
Right.
No, it's not too late. We don't know where the peak is going to be. So if we're still peaking in a few weeks, we'll be really glad that people stayed safe and stayed home if they got sick, and tried not to, impact the rest of the community if at all possible.
So I've seen that normally flu peak season is November, December, but you can see the flu all the way until May.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given our numbers now
in January.
Right. What is the likelihood that come April, the death toll isn't 100? And where does that balance out with the numbers nationwide? Because Megan and I were looking at stats before we got here today, and there are some organizations that report for children death, the death of children, or some people that are 65 and under, and then you can't find stats on people 65 and older.
66, like 1 year over.
What is that, and where can I find all of the information that's meshed together?
Right.
So that I know the total impact of a disease that's clearly plaguing us.
So great question. The CDC's website actually is a pretty good place to go to kind of get both of those viewpoints. So it is confusing, as we were talking about before. When you see this big difference in the numbers, typically the reportable cases, so the cases that the doctors are required to report to the Department of Public Health are the under 65 range. It's more of a reportable event.
And why? Can you say why that is?
It's simply less common and a little less expected. So it's not to sound uncharitable to our elderly population.
66 and older, right? Okay.
But
which is young.
Which is still young, absolutely. Right. So it's not a judgment on anyone's part about whose life matters more or anything like that.
Okay.
It's simply that it's less expected, and so it's just a more meaningful statistic in some ways.
Interesting.
So you might look at the end of the season at the nationwide numbers of deaths of reportable cases under 65. Will probably be well into the hundreds, if not 1,000.
Okay.
But then you'll typically also see statistics about 30,000 total deaths. And now you can kind of understand where that distinction is, because the vast majority of the people who pass away from flu are older than 65. All those folks matter, but in terms of the reports and how it gets portrayed in the media, it does get very confusing for people.
Right, it's like an iceberg. You see just the tip, and that's what we're getting represented in the media. You have just the people under 65, but the base of that iceberg is so large. And if people like myself, like Megan, who don't get our vaccines, sorry, we don't get the flu shot, are out in public we could be spreading that to other people. And then you have to worry about your exposure on public transit to kids that are more susceptible and older people that are more susceptible. So what do you do in those situations? How do you help protect those around you and yourself?
Yeah. So in addition to understanding how important the disease can be in terms of deaths and hospitalizations and just misery, it's also, big misery index there.
Someone's saying here, I've had the flu 3 times this season.
Wow.
Only in January.
Wow.
How?
So it's
That's Joanne
possible,
Marie Hinn, so thank you.
So I'm sorry that you've been suffering so much. It's possible some of the, well, there are different strains of flu, so that is technically possible. Some of that might have been a very severe cold. It's very hard to tell the difference on an individual level.
Okay.
So what I was saying before, though, is in addition to us all recognizing that this is a very serious disease, and that hasn't really changed, it's also a disease that's able to be spread through the air. And that's actually very unusual. So otherwise, I'd be sick every day of my life, right?
As a doctor, as a pediatrician,
you know,
Where's your mask?
if every cold and other little virus and things were just, pneumonia, if all that was just spread through the air, we'd all be in big trouble. And so it is important for the public to understand that influenza, again, can be spread through the air, and that's very unusual. So when you do go out into public and you are sick, you are exposing other people, whether they're vulnerable or not, and then it just continues from there. So the better that we can protect each other by staying at home when we're sick is very helpful for the whole community.
Stephen St. Laurent saying flu shots don't work. This is, again, their opinion. This one wasn't even close. Where is the next batch? So people are at a point where even if they're getting the shot and getting sick and getting sick multiple times after the shot, where's the next batch? Is that accurate question? Is that an accurate question?
Oh,
are
absolutely.
There batches?
It's a very fair question. And we are disappointed in our ability to always outpace the changes that the virus makes. That's the great challenge. Otherwise, it would be like measles. You'd get your 2 shots for your life and we're done.
Right.
So, Mother Nature has made a very crafty little virus here, and so it is our challenge to always keep up with that. I would encourage you to think about it this way, though. Even if we have a low match rate, the latest numbers that are really still guesses, 32% is a number that's been put out lately.
And that's the number that represents what?
In terms of what reduction of flu one would get from getting their flu vaccine. Okay. So let's just take that number just as an example.
Okay.
That's still 32% less chance of things like dying or being in the hospital.
This is true.
So if we're talking about, 30,000 deaths or even 1,000 deaths, even the 27 deaths, if we could have prevented, though. So of the people that have died so far, what we know is that 70% of these deaths that we just talked about are in unvaccinated people. Okay.
70.
Okay.
So the other 30, how about them, those who have been vaccinated?
So the 30% were vaccinated, but 70% weren't. So that tells you the protection isn't complete.
Right.
But I'm much happier to be in that 30% category than that 70% category.
But then what happens with people like some of our viewers? We had Mary Atwater-Kelman chime in and talk about vegan vaccines. And this interest in the vegan community, which is so large in California, even in our area.
Right.
This need to not want, I don't even know if people knew that the flu vaccine was made with chicken cells. Do you know much about this?
Yes. So they are grown in cells. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like a chicken anymore, right?
Okay.
Right.
So the cells in the little tube, can be derived from a number of sources, including chickens. To the extent that I think about it, I don't think you really would consider that there's then chicken per se in the vaccine.
No, but for those who practice the vegan lifestyle, that's a deal.
Right.
That's a deal breaker. It's a major deal breaker.
I would hate to have them think of it that way. I mean, when we're talking about, way less than a crumb, that's probably something that in reality they're being exposed to in many different ways on a daily basis, whether they care to think about it that way or not.
Okay.
Those types of very, very minimal exposures as just part of any kind of food processing are going to happen.
So would you say, though, that those people who are super concerned, like some of our viewers, would the efficacy of the drug that is made vegan be the same as that is not?
So there's no commercially licensed, FDA-controlled or tested vegan vaccine. That doesn't exist. So, that would be wonderful if at some point someone's able to come up with an alternative that works as well or better. It's a little hard for me to imagine. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar project every year that the world goes through to create and develop and stay that step ahead of these vaccines.
Okay.
So it's pretty hard for me to imagine that any one entity or company would be able to have that kind of infrastructure to be able to then produce every year that updated vaccine that would beat what the world basically is able to come up with.
I know.
And that would be wonderful.
That we could get there.
That would be great.
Right.
But given how challenging it is with everything we've learned about traditional vaccine manufacture over decades, that would be a big task to come up with.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to continue this conversation. I know you have to go do an interview right now with Daniela Pardo, so that you're going to find this interview in later editions of ABC 10 Today. So keep it locked to your TV screen because you'll see Dr. Hempstead pop up. But we will continue to have a conversation. If you can stick around, because we're getting a lot of viewer comments, and I don't want to ignore them or let you guys think that we're ignoring you. So if you don't mind sticking around after Extra Shot, and we'll do another Facebook Live with you. Is that cool?
I
Sounds
love
good.
it.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Hempstead. So we'll relieve you. Marcus Allen, why don't you come in so we can talk about our next topic? Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. Yeah.
You go hook up with Daniela right now.
Right.
Big fan of your work. Good to see you.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you.
Likewise. I washed my hands.
You wash your hands. I know. It's
Cold
always
flu
interesting
season.
with the doctor, right? Here
That's
you
right.
like to be in your best behavior in terms of germs and whatnot. But interesting conversation. I know still a ton of questions.
Yes, tons,
Mark,
and we see them.
And we see them. And Mark, you've done a lot of traveling this year, late last year into this year. Is it worse here than other communities, do you feel?
Everybody has it. In
matter
every
where you
city.
go?
Yeah, everyone's saying, I've got that thing that's going around. I thought, wow, you're in Detroit, and then I was in New York and LA. That thing's going around everywhere.
Yeah.
But I want to know, like, is it actually the flu? That's what you just don't know.
things are
It just
Right.
could be a cold, like the doctor was saying. And we'll get to these questions because there are people that are wondering, do I actually have the flu?
Yeah.
And you have to go to see a doctor and get that all checked out.
Keep your questions coming, right?
Exactly.
And we
Please
will
keep them coming.
Documenting. For